The first-person perspective has always proven popular for video games. Such is its popularity that several third-person franchises, like Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption, have even opted to include it as an option in their latest titles. But what about a third-person perspective for certain titles that lack it? How would the action change? Let's take a look at 13 such titles where this could potentially work. Cyberpunk 2077. This one seems like the most obvious for a number of different reasons. First, it's a perspective that CD Projekt Red is well versed in, though it would require different changes to combat given how it differs from The Witcher 3. Second, it provides a deeper connection to one's personal V since you can actually see all the cosmetic choices made. Third, if features like wall running and sticking to walls with mantis blades ever get added back in, they'd work pretty well in third person like the original design was intended to be. It'd be a lot of work, but may probably feel better to play at the end of the day. Call of Duty 2021. Remember when Sledgehammer Games was working on a third-person Call of Duty title? It seemed like a pipe dream, but then a third-person mode could offer a fresh perspective on things, especially with the ability to peek around corners and such. If the next Call of Duty had the same, it would be one step towards shaking things up, if nothing else. Destiny 2. Since Destiny 1, players have been able to go into third person when wielding certain relics or swords. At the time, it was especially impressive because Destiny was already a fun first-person shooter, but the movement and platforming felt better in third person. Again, this isn't a permanent option unless you want to wield a sword with no ammo. A proper and permanent third-person perspective, whether over the shoulder or otherwise, would be great, especially since it allows players to admire their Guardian's looks all the more. Overwatch 2. When Blizzard Entertainment expanded on its spectating options for Overwatch matches, it added a third-person perspective. This provided an interesting view of the action, one that was grounded but still floaty enough to make for interesting observing. Overwatch 2 could do well to have a similar kind of option, since it can obviously work and provide a better sense of one's surroundings. Plus, like Destiny, it would help to admire the different character skins that one has unlocked, rather than simply showing them off for other players. Diablo 4. Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls on consoles had a particularly interesting moment when you fought Belial in Act 2. The camera took a somewhat third-person perspective to the action, which looked pretty cool. Some camera manipulation by a fan also showcased how a theoretical third-person perspective would look on PC, which unfortunately never actually became a mod. The main takeaway is that it would look pretty awesome in Diablo 4, even if Blizzard has no intention of implementing it now or ever. One can still dream though. The Darkness 2. The Darkness 2 is a violent game. Like, really violent. So with all the ultra-violence going on, it would only make sense to have a third-person perspective so we can see the demon arms ripping up and tossing foes aside. It would also work well when playing as the Darkling and infiltrating spaces and executing foes. Again, not the biggest change in gameplay, but it would certainly make for something fresh. Resident Evil Village. Capcom seems comfortable dividing its Resident Evil series based on the perspective. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard favors a slower, more methodical style of gunplay and movement, while the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes are decidedly faster and more responsive. It may be too much to hope that Resident Evil Village has a third-person perspective at any point, but based on gameplay, which indicates some more gun-heavy gameplay, it would certainly be cool. Dishonored 1 and 2. The Dishonored series, for all its firearms and melee combat, has always contained several elements that can smoothly transition to third person. Stealth and platforming may arguably be easier to execute in this mode, and given how much gunplay there actually is, one couldn't help but wonder at the possibilities. Then again, with the studio's next title Deathloop once again being in first person, it may be a while before we see anything in the third person perspective. GhostWire Tokyo. For all the work that Tango Gameworks put into The Evil Within, which is inherently a third-person game, it's interesting to see that GhostWire Tokyo will be a first-person game. The combat is even described as karate mixed with magic and has takedowns for finishing off enemies. Granted, these have been shown to work in first person, see Dishonored, and the developer has added a first-person mode to The Evil Within too. but maybe it can have a third-person mode as well in its next game for old time's sake. Minecraft Dungeons. Much like Diablo 3, Minecraft Dungeons could work very well in the third person. The key difference being that there's already a precedent for the same, with the original Minecraft having a third person perspective. Given how the action isn't too insanely busy or effects heavy, pulling the camera in closer and turning it into a more personal hack and slash action RPG would be cool. If nothing else, it would help set the game apart from Diablo and other clones. Terraria. Upon seeing Risk of Rain transition from a 2D roguelite platformer slash shooter to third person, you have to wonder, what else could make that jump? Terraria almost seems like a no-brainer. Sure, there's mining and exploration a la Minecraft, but that's only one small part of the gameplay. Imagine interacting with the various NPCs, fighting massive bosses, or gazing upon one's powerful gear in third person. It would take a lot of work to make it happen, not to mention optimizing for performance, but it's enticing all the same. Path of Exile 2. With all of the bullet hell scenarios, on-death effects, cheap bosses, and performance issues resulting in rage-quitting moments, perhaps the current Path of Exile isn't too well suited for a third-person perspective. Path of Exile 2 could work though, especially with grinding gear games looking at a slower overall style of gameplay that's less effects heavy. It could also help show off those snazzy improved visuals all the more. Resident Evil HD Remaster. Unlike Resident Evil 2 and 3 Remake, Resident Evil HD Remaster, which is the HD version of the Resident Evil 1 remake from 2002, has fixed camera angles. It's weird when you think about it. Why not complete the trifecta at some point, giving Jill and Chris the luxury of over-the-shoulder aiming? If Resident Evil 2 Remake has taught us anything, it's that the atmosphere and pacing of a survival horror title could still be maintained even with such a perspective.
And that wraps it up. If you like what we are doing, please consider subscribing to our channel, and don't forget to switch on the bell notification icon. That way you will never miss out on any of our videos.